Now, we've heard absolutely loads about the Metropolitan Police Constables being involved in depraved WhatsApp group chats, specifically the group chat that Wayne Couzens was said to have been a part of, in which was discussed racism, misogyny, homophobia, and other just as despicable topics. Well, it now appears that other members of that WhatsApp group have now been charged and now face punishment. 34-year-old PC William Neville, 35-year-old PC Jonathon Cobban and 45-year-old former Metropolitan Police Constable Joel Borders were all in court this week, where some of the comments each had made in the group were read out by the prosecution, including comments about beating and sexually assaulting women, raping a colleague and tasering children. The WhatsApp chat comments were discovered whilst police were examining Wayne Couzens' mobile phone after his horrific offence against Sarah Everard in March 2021. One of the comments from Neville described a time that he had pinned down a 15-year-old girl, saying, "I knew all the struggle cuddles would come in useful at some point." Now, to be fair, this comment is basically a joke that Jimmy Carr uses. I get it's not for everybody, but it's the context it's given in that should matter. And unfortunately, in messages or written word, it's very difficult to put context and meaning across without using a tone of voice.
Rape is such a horrible word, though. It's such a harsh, brutal, awful word. Rape. That's why I prefer to call it a struggle snuggle.
Prosecutor Edward Brown QC told Westminster Magistrates Court, "We submit that this is acting out a rape fantasy or other non-consensual physical touching." Which, in fairness, it could well be, but again, context is everything. Edward Brown QC suggested that the expression struggle cuddle implies using lawful physical restraint as an excuse or cover for non-consensual physical or sexual contact. He said, "We submit this is to be wholly demeaning and grossly offensive to any young girl who expected and deserved sympathetic treatment from a police officer on duty, and to be grossly offensive to the wider public." Nicholas Yeo, defending, said, "The suggestion that from that message one can gather that there's a reference to a rape fantasy is an overreach. In my submission, the language may be light-hearted, but it is incapable of bearing that meaning. The only meaning that one can draw is that it is a reference to some sort of police skill and the reference to some sort of police force in the context of detaining an individual." Well, clearly Mr. Yeo doesn't watch Jimmy Carr, in which it is most definitely used as a term for rape. Some of PC Jonathon Cobban's comments likened driving through Hounslow in West London to the FGM patrol. Said he was hoping to get into a fight to prove himself and allegedly discussed a violent fantasy. Police Constable Joel Borders is said to have written, "I can't wait to get on guns so I can shoot some cunt in the face." To which Cobban replied, "Me too. I want to taser a cat and a dog to see which reacts better. I think the cat will get more pissed off and the dog will shit itself. I want to test this theory. Same with children. Zap zap, you little fuckers." Borders then allegedly replied, "And a couple of Downies," which is believed to have been a reference to people with Down syndrome. Borders is also alleged to have sent a comment saying, "Lead me on, then get me locked up when I rape and beat her. Sneaky bitch," which is believed to have been said about a female colleague. Prosecutor Edward Brown QC told the court the defendants were all serving police officers when the messages were sent. On occasions, they were on duty at the time these messages were sent. It's also said that an unnamed member of the group, not sure why they've left him unnamed unless they left the group which would remove their name from the messages, said, "Mate, they aren't going to ditch you with your skill set unless you finger a DV victim." And by finger, that doesn't mean grass one up. And by DV, he means domestic violence. Cobban then replied, "That's all right, DV victims love it. That's why they are repeat victims more often than not." Borders is also alleged to have said, You know when it's getting near to the end of your night shift in Hounslow because you can hear the call to prayer. And, lucky bastard, I bet I'll get paired up with the only gay on section. The messages were sent, the court heard, on a group chat called Battle and Stoppers / Atkins Puppets, when the PCs were either in training or on probation as serving Metropolitan police officers. Westminster Magistrates Court were told that Joel Borders said many of the messages were sent before he became a fully fledged police officer and after time on the beat and meeting domestic violence victims, he realised the exchanges had been inappropriate. Neville insisted, "I do not believe that every Muslim is a terrorist, and I have made a very misjudged joke." Cobban said the comment about domestic violence victims was a joke in very bad taste, saying, "I didn't mean it. It was an absolutely unacceptable comment to make, and I shouldn't have said it." On the subject of another comment, like in Hounslow to a deluxe colour code, Cobban said, "This comment was in relation to the vibrancy of the area. It was a surprise to see all the different shops and signs in a variety of colours and languages." The trial continues, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more inappropriate remarks that we get to hear. Now let me flip back to the Jimmy Carr statement I made earlier. Personally, I like jokes that are very edgy. I watched Jimmy Carr and Frankie Boyle, both extremely funny and both particularly edgy, and in some cases offensive, but I take that in context. For example, I don't for a moment believe that Jimmy Carr is a 12-year-old Filipino boy living in his home. But again, it needs to be taken in context. And normally when I report stories like this one, I get people telling me off because these were messages in a private WhatsApp group and the offenders have freedom of speech, which is correct to a certain point. When you join the police, you agree to forego some of the privileges we as civilians have in order to exchange them for other privileges for being a copper. One of the things you must give up are friends with civilians and family members because you are expected to grass them up if they do something that they shouldn't be doing. And being able to joke about such things, as we've just heard, is another thing, as there is no proof that it was said in jest and could be taken seriously. In fact, looking at the history of the police force, many of the things these three have spoken about have been a reality to some police officers, and therefore even the mere fact of joking about such topics should be off limits. There is nothing to say that none of these are discriminatory or predatory, therefore such comments must be taken seriously, as they are enforcers of the law. We need to know that the people enforcing the law are of sound mind and judgment, and these kind of jokes, whether in private or not, doesn't fill me with confidence that any of them are of sound mind and judgment.